Tell us a little bit about well, let's start with your dad. What your dad was like.
My father was very quiet. He you wouldn't even know he was in the house really. He was very quiet, but he was very assertive. You know, I mean, if he felt that he was right, he would stick up for himself. You know, but he was quiet, and he loved my mother so much that he let her rule the house really. So
Did he let her rule, or did she take reign?
well, she really took over, but I mean, she took. My mother was very aggressive, you know, and she was a loving person, but she was very aggressive. She wanted her way or no way, you know, and she was tough sometimes, you know. She was very how can I say it? She had rules and she wanted them followed. And but she was funny. She gave us a good life, you know. But she was strict, very strict.
Did they ever tell you, or did you ever find out how those two met?
I don't know how they met. She never really said. But she was only 21 when her and Papa got married. So see that picture of them up there. It's how young they were.
Huh. Did she So he was really quiet and shy. And
he was very quiet, and he'd sit in the chair, and of course we never had any television at that time, so he'd sit in the chair with the radio next to him, and he'd listen to the radio all night long. So yeah, and then
was he listening to music or to?
No, he listened to like games and stuff like that, you know, that was on. He wasn't a music person. And, you know, in those days, they didn't have all the stuff that they've got now, you know? So that they had to be content with puzzles and, you know, just generally radio and games, you know, that you play. And that's what they were satisfied with. And, of course, my mother never worked out. So it was just, and then Papa worked down to the Van Ralt Company, and that's where he had the stroke.
What's the Van Ralt Company?
It was, you know, for lingerie and stuff like that down on High Rock Avenue.
Oh.
It was Van Ralt Company, and my sister Agnes worked down there, and so did Marie. And so Papa had the stroke down there, and then a year to the day that he had the stroke, he died.
What was his job?
He was a machinist.
Yeah.
And he worked years ago at where SB is now. It used to be a machine shop out there. And he worked there. And then, of course, he went to Van Ralt's and he was a machinist down there. He was a smart man, you know, but he was just very quiet.
Tell the story about the books.
Oh, about Agnes coming in late? My mother had told her to be home at 10 o'clock from a date that she had. And
how old was Agnes?
Agnes was, oh God, she was maybe, I'd say maybe 19. And she was supposed to be in at 10 o'clock. And we were living over on Mitchell Place, which was a huge big house. And it had like a circular staircase, you know. And so going up the one stair was a landing, and then there was a bookcase there. And when Agnes came in, my mother, who was, you know, she would never scream or yell, but she would just show her displeasure in a lot of other ways, you know. And so when Agnes walked in the door, knowing that she was late, she was trying to be quiet, Mama was standing on the staircase waiting for her, and she threw all the books in the bookcase at her, not to hit her, but just to show her displeasure. Oh, God. Those were the days, though, you know, and like Mama was funny. She would buy these things secondhand, you know, from people, clothes, because we didn't have that much money in those days. And she would buy them from this woman, and then if they needed fixing or anything, she was good on a machine, and she would fix them for her. So she was trying on this dress to me one day, and I jumped because I felt like a needle went in me. And so when I jumped, she said, "Stand still." And I tried to stand still, but the needle hit me again. And I jumped again, and that's when I got told that I was supposed to stand still. She gave me a good slap. And when she took the dress off, lo and behold, there was a wasp in there.
Insolent child.
She felt so bad, she almost cried, you know, because she had misjudged, you know, and she was very quick to, you know, blame herself if she did something like that, you know.
What did she do? What did she and your dad do for fun? Like, did they go out? Did they have a group
Just
of friends
to the
they went out
movies.
with? And...
Just to the movies, and then they would go out to my aunts and uncles, you know, visiting them. One of my aunts lived in Yaddo, and he was like a chauffeur for all the artists, and they lived up over the artist, and they lived a very secluded life because they couldn't sort of make a move because they disturbed the artists, you know. And we would go out there for Thanksgiving, and oh God, it was just like torture because we were not allowed to even walk across the floor hard, you know, because the artists were downstairs.
But what year are we talking about? Or what decade?
God, it was when I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old.
So we're talking like the 40s, or?
Probably, well, no, the 40s, no, the 40s was when I was about 18.
Okay, so the 30s?
17 or 18, yeah.
The 30s, late 30s or something?
So, what started, now your mom wasn't sick when your dad died, right? She was fine?
No, when my father died, she was heartbroken, and my sister took her to New York.
Now, how did that happen with your dad? Didn't you say you went to church or something?
He went to church on an Easter Sunday. And, of course, my father was a convert. And he went to church on Easter Sunday. And he would let my mother go with us girls because we were all dressed up for Easter. Mm-hmm. And so my mother stopped to see my Aunt Mary on the way home. And I came home. And when I came home, he was in agony. And he told me to go get my mother. Mm-hmm. And when I ran up to Pinewood Avenue to get my mother, by the time we got there, he was crawling on the floor. He was in such pain. Wow. And so we called the doctor, and the doctor knew. He said he knew the minute he looked at him that he wasn't going to be alive very much longer. And after that, my mother was so bad that my sister took her to New York to visit her cousins down in New York, the Sullivans. Mm-hmm. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 14.
14, yeah.
And while she was down there, she fell a couple of times on the sidewalk. And so when she came home, she still wasn't good. And, you know, I used to sleep with her, and we used to fool a lot in bed, you know. And this one night that we were fooling in bed, you know, she would pinch me and I would pinch her back, you know, and stuff like that, you know, just carrying on a little bit, you know. And she grabbed a hold of my hair. And I said, "Oh, come on, Mom." I said, "Stop that," you know. But come to find out, she was having a seizure. Oh. And so when the doctor came, they ordered all these tests. Well, in those days, brain tumors were not prevalent. Mm. And they found out. It took them 2 years, but they found out she had a brain tumor. But what she did was they operated on a couple of the tumors in the back of her head, and that gave her a chance to, she had lost the use of one side.
Oh.
But when they removed the tumors, then she got the use of her arms and everything back again because it gave the other tumor a chance to enlarge.
Oh.
So, but she, and when they operated on her to remove the tumor, of course it was an operation that they hadn't done that much about, you know. She only weighed 80 pounds.
Oh, jeez. How old was she then?
47.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I meant to ask you before? I think I've asked you this before. Did they have nicknames for each other, your mom and your dad? Because she was Catherine and he was Emmett. Like, did they call each other?
She was Katie.
Oh.
Yeah, everybody called her Katie. We used to always sing that song, Katie. She used to hate us to sing that to her.
How was she with your brother and your sisters? Like, were any one of you the closer to her? Or
She was worried about Joe all the time because in those days when you had a heart murmur, it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And she would do anything to keep him quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nowadays, exercise is the thing, you know, but not her. She bought him funny books like they were going out of style. So he would sit and he was rather, I mean, he didn't get into activities a lot because of that. But I mean, I don't think she favored anybody one more than the other. But when she got sick, see, I was 16 then. And of course, Agnes and Marie had to go to work.
Mm.
And so I had to quit school and take care of her. Mm. And I was scared to death because I kept thinking, she used to have these seizures. And I was scared to death she'd have one and I wouldn't be able to bring her out of it, you know?
Yeah.
That's been tough.
Huh?
Must have been tough, especially at that age.
It was awful. You know, because you don't know what you're doing in those, when you're that age for sickness.
Yeah.
And in those days, they didn't give you any rules to follow.
Mm-mm.
I mean, you kids are so lucky now because of science and because of the change in times and everything. You're up on everything.
Yeah.
But in those days, we weren't up on anything.
Tell me, like, some of your early childhood stuff, like with you and your brothers and sisters. Like, do you remember any good stories about when you guys were younger?
He used to tell you about the movies or something.
Oh, yeah. I used to have to take my brother Joe to the movies. But before I went, I used to have to turn in all the cans and bottles. Because the movies cost 10 cents those days. And I had to get enough for him and me, you know.
What
so
did they
there was a
collect?
lot
They collect the cans for aluminum or something, or?
I don't know what they were collecting them for, but we used to have to bring them back to get the money back.
Was that during the war, or?
No, it wasn't during the war. It was
Because they didn't have a bottle law back then. Where it was a
no,
nickel.
well, you didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
But if you did do it, you got the money back.
Yeah.
But it was something because I could never go to a movie with my girlfriends or anything because I used to have to bring him. And it wasn't that I didn't love him. It was the fact that I wanted to be alone with my girlfriends. But she was funny. She had rules. I mean, just like when we did something wrong, she'd say, go out on that bush and pick a branch off.
Uh-oh.
And you'd take an hour picking out a branch that you wouldn't think would hurt you.
That's probably the worst part of it too, huh?
Yeah, because she wouldn't hit us hard, but she'd just give it a couple of them on the legs, But you'd stand there for an hour and say, which one wasn't going to hurt me?
Probably by the time you picked it out, she'd cooled off too. That's probably a good technique.
What kind of rules did she have?
Let me see.
Any rules that you thought were kind of
Well,
strange?
she really, we couldn't ever say if she called you, you could never say what or anything like that. You had to say, yes, Mom, You know, you never could answer back.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the things. God forbid if you ever answered back. You know. But my father, you know, he would take his belt off, you know. If we were doing something wrong, he would take his belt off and he would snap it, you know. And she'd say, "Don't you hit those kids. Those are my kids."
Good cop, bad cop.
But, yeah, we had some good times, though. Mama was strict, but I think that it gave us a sense of like honesty and stuff like that. She was, you know, great on that. You know, you had to follow the rules. You had to go to church. You had to say your prayers and stuff like that. She was very strict on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sounded like in bed though, like you're saying, she was kind of playful too.
Well, she was hilarious in some of the things that she would do, like.
So, like you're saying, she was kind of playful too.
Well, she was hilarious in some of the things that she would do, like. She was a great one for playing horses, you know. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have the money in those days, but going to the pool room, you could play a horse for 25 cents or 50 cents. And she would stand there next to somebody that was playing $50 and listen to what they were playing. Playing horses, you know. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have the money in those days, but going to the pool room, you could play a horse for 25 cents or 50 cents. And she would walk over to the track in the summertime and she would play, but in those days you could play 50 cents. Mm-hmm. You know. And she was very frugal as far as, you know, spending the money. That she wouldn't be rash about it. Mm-hmm. But she would, you know, that was her enjoyment. Mm-hmm. And she would sit all winter long with her feet up in the oven in the kitchen stove and pick out these horses all year long, so in the summertime she could play them. That was her enjoyment. Yeah.
Was she very involved in like your guys' school or anything? Like going down
there? No. She left it to the sisters. And believe me, they took over. They were something. Yeah, they were strict, the sisters were. But I do think that you got a sense of moral values from them. You know, a lot of them were over the top. You know, that they would go far beyond. And even when my kids were in school, I mean, they were strict with the kids. But by the same token, I used to go up there. If I thought that they were doing something out of the way, I used to go up there. I called them up many a time on the phone.
Because they were being a little
because they were going overboard. There was one nun with Charlie that when I gave him a bath, he was only a little kid. His whole hand was red. And I said to him, "What happened to your hand?" And he said, "Nothing." And I said, "What happened to your hand?" He said, "Oh, sister tapped me." And I thought that was quite a tap, you know. So I called her up. And I asked her what he did. He was gazing out the window when she was teaching. And I said, "Well, is this affecting his marks?" "Oh, no, he's a 90 student." And I said, "Well, sister, I got news for you." I said, I never allow anybody to put their hands on my kids. I said, and don't you do it again. I said, from now on, you have any problems with him, give me a call and I'll be glad to do something about it. But I said, don't ever lay a hand on him again. But he never knew I called up like that. Mm-hmm. I never let the kids know that, you know, I sided with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any bad experiences when you were in school yourself with the nuns?
Know that, you know, I sided with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any bad experiences when you were in school yourself with the nuns?
I didn't have any experiences, but I'll tell you something funny. The sister Hugh Francis, her name was, she was in her 80s, and she was still teaching. And we had this one guy, his name was Walt Corey, And he was sort of a sleepy guy that didn't pay too much attention, and like that. And she would call on him, and she felt that he was lazy, So she would say to him, if she asked him a question and he didn't want to answer it or something like that, she would say, "Laziness, have I ever offended thee? No, I am thy faithful servant."
Was this in school?
Yeah. In front of the whole class. And do you know that that's the only thing I can remember about that nun? And it never left me. She was so funny. And one day she went to run to the door or something for something, and she had left the bottom drawer open, and she tripped over it and fell, and everybody was so amazed that she was on the floor, that nobody moved. And she said, "Pick me up, somebody!"
So when your mom died, you ended up you quit school to take care of her.
Yeah.
So what happened? How did she did she pass in a hospital, or did she?
She was in surgery. They were removing the tumor. And she died. I didn't get down that day because I figured I'd stay home and clean the house, and I took down all the curtains and everything else, thinking that when she came home I'd spend more time with her, But she didn't come home.
So what happened then? Did you guys stay in that house, or what happened? Where did you guys?
Well, Joe and Agnes finally. Joe and Agnes had gotten married when she was in the hospital, so that they could stay down
Is that
in
legal?
Albany. Huh?
Your brother and sister got married?
No, Joe Prock. Joe Prock and Agnes got married, and they stayed down in Albany. So that when they came home, we had this big house on Ludlow Street. So that's when we moved into Nelson Avenue. And we moved upstairs over that. And then I got a job down at the GE.
So it was Agnes and Joe Prock and Joe and you all together?
Joe and Marie and I.
Oh,
yeah.
Marie too.
Where was the GE?
I went to the GE
In
during the war.
In Schenectady?
Yeah. And I worked down there for a while, and I couldn't stand traveling back and forth. It was making me sick.
Yeah.
And so then I came back and I got a job at the Colonial. That was the Colonial on Broadway. I got a job waitressing.
What were you doing at GE? I didn't know you worked there.
I can't remember what I was doing in the beginning, but they transferred me over to Building 28 to work with this Walt. I can't remember his last name. He was a Polish guy, and it was doing a little bit of office work in the machinery part of the. It was I used to have to take parts to different parts of the plant, and then I would come back and record them and everything. And I can remember that there was carbon on the backs of these bills and things, and I looked one day and all my fingers were all infected, and I went over to the infirmary. They took tweezers and they pulled them all out, whatever it was, and left big holes in my hand.
Oh, jeez.
See, in those days, they didn't do things right.
Yeah.
And, I was a long time healing that up.
Wow.
Great big holes in my
You
fingers.
must have been only, 17 or 18 or something?
Yeah, I was about 17.
Huh.
I came up here to Saratoga and I started waitressing. And then, I met your grandfather.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was out with another guy.
Uh-oh.
And they used to have a place up here to Paramount Pete's. And we used to go up there for dancing and stuff like that. It was where the Adirondack Trust parking lot is now.
Oh, okay.
Up here. So I was sitting in the booth with my boyfriend, and Grandpa came over and he says, "Bobby, can I dance with your girl?" And Bobby says, "Sure." That was the end of him. Yeah.
Wasn't there didn't something happen at a hardware store too?
Oh, yeah, and
Was this before, or?
Oh, that was before I went to and I didn't know he worked at the National Store. But there was an opening for a job down there, so I went down.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Sassy was interviewing me and everything, and then I saw him out in the back room there.
And this
I
was
thought,
after you had danced with him already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, he's working here,
Mm-hmm.
And so after I left, Tony Sassy asked him what what I was like and like that. And he said, oh, she's great. She'll do a good job, He didn't even know me. And we had fun down there at the National. We really did. I worked there until after I was married.
Wow.
And they gave me a crib. Was it a crib? No, it was a bath thing. One of those bath things that you give the baby a bath
Oh,
in.
yeah.
For when young Charlie was born. And I used to walk down from Nelson Avenue to Broadway every single day with the carriage and then walk back with Grandpa. Because we didn't have a car for 8 years after we were married.
Uh-huh.
So how long did you guys date?
Maybe about 8 months.
And then you had a big wedding, didn't you?
Well, I didn't want to get married in a big wedding. But Agnes and Joe did not like Grandpa. Because he came out of the service with TB.
Mm-hmm.
And they were scared I would get TB.
Mm.
And I was never afraid of it,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I wanted to get married, and they wanted me to get married in white and in a veil and everything, I thought, oh, why fight it, because it was just one more thing that they could hold against him,
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead with it, But I really didn't want to get a big wedding.
Where'd you get married?
St. Clements.
St. Clements?
Do you
But it was
remember-
under the school. It
Is
was
that where they had that little chapel where one of the
they
Farrington
had a
girls?
church there.
Is that where one of the Farrington girls got married 5 or 10 years ago?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so, because I wouldn't think there was a church there now. There isn't a church there now. It's just classrooms.
Okay. Off to the right, as you're facing the church, off to the right where the priests and stuff are.
Oh, that's the St. John Newman Chapel.
Yeah, that's really pretty.
But this is over in the school.
Oh, okay.
When you go in the school, you would get down some steps, and you'd go in, take a right, and there was this little church. I loved it there. It was really nice. It was cozy,
Uh-huh.
And everybody knew everybody else, and
Yeah, sounds nice.
it was really nice.
Do you remember how Grandpa proposed to you?
I don't remember how if he exactly asked me. He just said, "When we get married," and he kept trying to move it up, and I kept trying to put it off. And finally, I just couldn't deal with it anymore,
Why were you trying to put it off?
Well, it's just that I thought it was too soon. I mean, I hadn't known him that long.
Mm-hmm.
His father went with my aunt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, when you met Grandpa, what was he like?
He was handsome. He really was handsome. He was always good looking, but I mean, he was really handsome. Oh, there's his picture up there.
Mm-hmm.
And real healthy and strong, and he had his own ways, and he was really good. Yeah. But as the years wore on and he got all that pain, he was in pain. He was a lot of pain.
Did he have, what did you guys do for fun when you went out, when you were dating?
We used to go out dancing, and we
What kind of music do you remember? Any of the stars that
just
play?
the bands, the
big bands.
big bands, yeah.
Any like
We like jitterbugging,
yeah.
And stuff like that. But Grandpa was a wonderful dancer.
Uh-huh.
He taught me how to dance because I never was that great. I mean, I could waltz or something like that, but not anything great,
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend Mary Pitney thought he was the greatest dancer on earth.
You told her to back off?
No, she said I was always very gracious about letting her dance with him.
I mean, we gotten up to the point where we wanted to get up to.
You could do it more another day, or?
I think we should. I don't want to do big giant chunks all at once, and then you get tired of talking. It's tiring.
I forgot about that. But anyway, she would put her makeup on up in the bedroom, and Buzzy went up and laid down on the bed one day. And when Agnes turned around to get her hat, Buzzy had chewed it.
Oh.
And she broke a mirror over his head.
God.
Yeah. Agnes had a temper. Yeah, you wouldn't think it when you see her now, but you know, for something like that, she would get mad because her things were her things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all got a kick out of that. And then one day we had this cat, and it would get down in the coal bin, you know. And Agnes took it upstairs one day and gave it a bath, and that was the last we ever saw of it. Took off and ran away.
Oh.
Yeah. And you know, when we lived over, when Dad and I first got married, we lived on Nelson Avenue, and we lived there for 10 years. But I used to take care of the furnace down there because there was 3 apartments in the house, you know. And I used to go down and chop the wood and everything out and keep the furnace going for the 3 apartments.
How come you had to do it for all the
Well,
3
Dad was
apartments?
working and I was home, so, you know, I just asked him how to, you know, put the things on and everything. I wouldn't know how to do it now. But I used to take care of it, and I was scared to death to go down in the basement because there was rats down there.
Hmm.
And so before I'd go down in the basement, there was shovels and brooms and everything in the cellarway, and I used to throw them all down the cellar stairs before I'd go down, and then on the way up I'd bring them up for the next time. But
Do you remember anything else about your grandfather?
no, it's just that, you know, he was quiet. He was a very quiet man. But he liked to drink, and he used to go down to Sperry's on Caroline Street. And this one day, my mother was down shopping, and she happened to pass by. And he had all his money out like in a fan, you know, showing it to everybody. So she knocked on the window, you know, and she goes, and he came out the door. And as she was talking to him, she was hollering at him, "What are you doing in there?" and everything. She was taking the money away from him, you know, and he didn't realize it. So when he came home that night, he was all down in the mouth, you know. She says, "What's the matter with you anyway?" Of course, my mother was a great one. She didn't care what she said to anybody. She was very outspoken. "What's the matter with you anyway?" And he said, "Nothing." She says, "I suppose you lost all your money, didn't you? Drinking all your money up," you know. And he just hung his head, you know, and everything. So finally, she went in and she took all the money. And she gave it back to him. She says, "Here's your money. I took it away from you yesterday." And he never forgot that. But yeah, she was terrible. My mother was strict. Very
Sounds
strict.
funny, though.
But she had a method for everything, you know? But I'll never forget her knocking on those Sperry's windows. And he was funny, too, because he'd sit there and he'd drink, and these young fellas would come along and they'd tease him, you know? And he'd say, "Leave me alone now, I'm just here to drink," you know? And they'd sit down at the table with him, and they'd just, you know, kind of bug him, you know? They thought it was smart. So he kept telling them, "Leave me alone. I'm not bothering anybody. Leave me alone." And they didn't do it. So he just reached up and he took both of their heads and he knocked them right against his own heads. He was terrible. He had the hardest, they said he had the hardest head in Saratoga. He was known for that over to Skidmore College. He worked at Skidmore College as a gardener.
Now, what was his...
Sullivan.
Sullivan, he's a
Yeah.
Sullivan, okay.
But he just went, to the guys, and
That
they
thick
didn't
Irish
bother him
skull,
after
huh?
that.
That thick Irish skull.
Yeah. And there was something else that happened to him with his head, too. And they said, boy, he has the hardest head in Saratoga. But he was funny. He was a good guy, you know, but he just liked to drink, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Good
he'd go
Irish.
8 years,
Yeah.
sometimes 8 years without drinking. And he'd save all the let her outside,
Come on, man.
get a biscuit. Go on, get a biscuit.
That's not good.
Go on, Mandy.
Rattle that biscuit cage.
Go on. Go on. Come on.
Do you want to turn that off and I'll put her out, Jeff? So I don't know. I kind of missed my grandfather because he was the life of the party when he'd get going. But he would go 8, 9 years without drinking. He'd save up all his money. And then he'd go on a toot.
How long did he live with you for?
Oh God, he was with us. I can't ever remember not having him with us.
Hmm.
But see, his wives both died. He was married twice, and both wives were named Mary Alice Lee.
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah. And that's how come my cousin's named Mary Alice.
Oh.
You know, she was named after her but we never knew our grandmother.
Hmm. Well, how old were you when he passed away?
Gee, I can't really remember, but I must have been about 10 or 12.
Hmm.
And my father was a very, very quiet man. Very quiet. You'd never know he was in the house.
Did he get along with your grandfather?
Oh, yeah. He would never argue with anybody anyway. I mean, he was funny, though. My mother, like I said, was very strict, and she was very outspoken, and she didn't take nothing from anybody, and if she wanted to say something to somebody, she said it. And she was hollering at him one day, you know, because of something. I don't know. They were having a discussion about something, you know, and everything. And my father was the type of person that never fought, you know.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden he says, "You're right, Catherine. You're always right." And he walked away from her.
Well, while we're on the subject of childhood or whatever, do you want to talk about Agnes and Marie and Joe, like what they were like to? Do you have any stories about them?
Well, Agnes, she was older than us because she was 10 years older, and Marie was 3 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Lenny, what you doing, honey?
Oh, she's giving the dog biscuits.
Oh,
You wanna come in here and
sorry.
see
You
that?
can keep talking.
So Marie was just 3 years older than me, and my mother had a thing when she would make whipped cream,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and she was always making whipped cream to go over puddings or stuff like that, you know. We'd take turns who was going to have the beaters, you know, and of course I was younger than Marie, so she was a lot smarter than me,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave me the beaters this time because she figured it was my turn, you
Mhm.
know, and
No, honey, put that back.
so I was standing there with the beaters in my hand, and Marie came over, and she wanted those beaters, and she wasn't about to be put off with it, you know. So she started telling this story to me, you know, and she was going, nah, 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 nah. And every time she went like this, she took more of the whipped cream off the beaters. And when I looked down, they were gone. It's gone. But we always laughed. Mort Bear used to get the biggest kick out of that when after I told him the story, you know. I'd go out there sometimes and he would say, nah, 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 nah. But Marie and I used to get along good, you know, but it was just when we were young like that. I mean, I must have been maybe 3, 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just that much older where she would be able to maneuver, you know. But Marie was beautiful. Agnes and Marie were both beautiful when they were in, you know, like I can remember seeing Marie walk up the street and going to like assembly. They used to have assembly in school, you know.
Mhm.
And I can remember her going and on Friday afternoons to assembly all dressed up with her high heels and everything, you know, and the long curls. My mother used to sit by the hour and curl her hair around her finger, you know.
Jeez.
She never did that with me. But I mean, Marie's, you know, she loved Marie's hair. She would curl it for hours.
What was Joe like when he was little with all those women in the house?
Joe was sickly. I mean, he had heart murmur, and my mother wouldn't let him move.
Mm-hmm.
She would buy him funny books, anything he wanted, just to make sure he sat down in a chair. She was scared to death he was going to drop dead, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But he was a good kid. I used to take him to school. He didn't like school very well in those days. He didn't want to go. He was telling me the other day when I was up there, he said, remember, Jane, he says, what the hell I used to put you through taking me to school. And I've thought about it different times, but not, you know, I don't dwell on it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And he was a, and my mother wouldn't go with him. You know, she just pushed it off on the older ones,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Would he kick and scream because he didn't want to go?
He didn't want to go. And he'd holler all the way up to church, up to St. Clement's here. And you know, in those days, we never had buses to go to school or anything like that. I used to walk from East Avenue to St. Peter's
Wow.
and come home for lunch.
I don't know how you made it back for lunch.
I know it. And go through the park, you know, and everything. Now, you wouldn't let your kids do that today.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys used to walk down Broadway and stuff when you were younger?
Yeah.
For fun?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember any other stories from when you were younger. So, tell me about your wedding day, what you remember about it.
Well, it was just that, you know, after I got all through getting dressed and everything, I went down to the apartment downstairs under me to wait for somebody to come and pick me up, you know. I was scared to death. I was left all by myself. And I was only 19. I had just turned 19. And so, I mean, it was kind of a scary thing, you know, because in those days, they didn't tell you anything.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't prepare you for anything. I mean, Agnes, I lived with Agnes, and, you know, you just found out yourself, you know. What have you got?
You want some of my juice? Be careful with it, please. So they left you all by yourself?
Yeah, I
Sitting
left me all by
contemplating?
myself, and and then when I got up there, when I started down the aisle, I started to run down the aisle, and Dad pulled me back, you know. I can remember that.
We have some pictures of your wedding.
We missed a bunch of that.
Might want to start over with the grandpa stuff.
I don't want to repeat it a second time if it's on there.
It's not though. It was on pause since the last time you turned it
We
on.
could do it another time too, so that it's fresh.
All right.
You know. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay. I thought I'd be more nervous than I am.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, this is fun. Even if the camera wasn't there.
I know. Spend some more time with my grandchildren. Yeah, I've had some good times.
Well, why don't we skip up to how did you find out that you were pregnant for the first time?
I was trying to get pregnant because I wanted a baby so bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Did you try right after you got married? You started
Yeah.
trying.
mhm. And I wanted a baby so bad, and Dad was he was funny because the night I went to the hospital to have the baby, it was 4:00 in the morning, and he was out in the waiting room and everything, and of course they didn't let the husbands. I mean, things are so different now, you know. They didn't let the husbands near you when you were having your pains or anything like that.
Sounds like a good deal.
And So he came up to the door and he stuck his head in the door and he says, "Is there anything I can do?" And the nurse said, "I think you've done enough." So
you just started.
But he was funny. He never showed his emotions that much, but every time I would go to the hospital and have a baby, he'd be in the bathroom all the time I was in labor. Because he never showed his emotions, but it would tell on him, in another way. It was funny. But friends out that night when I had the baby. The next night he took all my girlfriends out. And Charlie was born on one of my girlfriend's birthdays, June 29th. We had a good crowd of kids that we used to go out with. They all used to come over to my house and I'd make lemon meringue pie and apple pie and everything, and we'd play cards. I wouldn't know one card from another now, but in those days I played, Mary Pitney's always said that she had such a good time at my house. We've been friends a long time, Mary Pitney and I.
Yeah.
You guys met, in elementary school or something?
She went to St. Clement's. She's younger than I am. She's about a year or two younger than me. And then when we started dating, we double dated. And her husband was my best man. Mm. And Pitt was sick. He had heart condition all his life. But he worked so hard. He worked so hard on that farm. He'd get up and have a milk route, and everything. And there really was no life for him because he had to go to bed as soon as he came home, They were a good couple.
So what were you and Grandpa like as parents, new parents?
I was fidgety, very nervous about, I was so afraid something was going to happen to Charlie. And I would make sure that he had plenty of fresh air. And of course he was a colicky baby. And so I was at my wit's end because I was trying to nurse him. And I had plenty of milk, but it was not strong enough. Mm-hmm. And finally I threw up my hands and asked the doctor for a formula. Mm-hmm. I mean, I couldn't stand that night after night after night crying, So once he went on Similac. That's a strong formula. Mm. He went on Similac and he was good after that. But he was cute. He was a little devil all the time, He'd dig his way out. I'd put him out in the snow fencing around the yard, and I'd give him a tablespoon and some things to dig with, And the next thing you know, he was digging himself out of the snow fencing. Down the street he'd go. And the guy used to say to me, 2 minutes and his mother will be back. I used to have my head stuck out that window all the time. Because we lived on the corner, and that was, all the people from Ben Ralph used to go up and down that street.
Mm-hmm. What was Grandpa like as a new father?
He was a good father, but he got sick shortly after Ann was born. He was really sick after she was born. Mm-hmm. And so he wasn't able to, like your father and you'll lift the kids up and, play with them and stuff like that. He couldn't do that because he was in pain most of the time. Mm-hmm. He'd hold the kids on his lap and stuff like that, but that would be it.
How old was he when you got married, Grandpa?
23.
Wow. So after Chuck came...
Then Ann came.
Will you tell the story about how you picked out her name?
Oh, yeah. I wanted so bad a little girl to go with Charlie. So they had a novena going up to St. Clement's to the Mother of Perpetual Help. Of course, we didn't have a car, so I was as big as a horse, and I went up to the novena. I walked up every night from Nelson Avenue up to church. And they had a 9-day novena. And I asked the Blessed Virgin if she would send me a little girl. I said I always wanted to name her Sharon. But if she would help me to have a little girl, I would name her Ann after her mother. And I had the little girl. So, and I thank God every day that, she had a miracle performed on her when she was little. Did you know that?
I think. Go ahead.
She had sinusitis, and in those days you didn't know how to treat it or anything else, and she was sick every week. I'd have to have the doctor come and give her a shot of penicillin, and she was in agony most of the time. So they had the relic of the infant's crib up to St. Clement's, and I had the 3 kids at the time. I had Rick that I was carrying in my arms, and I had Ann and Charlie, and I was standing in line because it was packed up there. And I was standing in line with all of them,
Oh, you know what might have happened? December 23rd, 2000. We're making chili with Grandma. What do we got here for ingredients?
got some hamburger.
How much? Can you tell us how much?
About, I think about maybe 3 pounds
Okay.
of hamburger and hot sausage.
Okay.
Maybe about a half a pound of that. And onions and peppers. And these are all tomatoes, diced tomatoes. And then I got kidney beans.
Did you how much tomato?
4 cans of diced tomatoes, large. Okay. And 2 large cans of red kidney beans. Chili powder. And grated Parmesan cheese.
And what's that, green pepper?
These are green peppers, yeah.
What do you got, like 2 green peppers?
Maybe one, yeah.
And maybe what, one large onion? Is that
yeah, that's 1 large onion.
Okay.
So I'll start and put the meat in here and break it up.
Is this the same recipe you used at Eastside Restaurant?
I used it there, yeah, only I used it in bigger volume.
What is that?
This is a hot sausage. This gives it a little bit of a hot flavor, you know.
I want the meal.
The onions. Letting it all cook.
This is a relic from Eastside Restaurant.
Oh yeah?
I use this a lot.
That's a nice big pan.
Yeah.
What's that, aluminum?
Yeah, I got that from, Polachek's that used to have I think they used to have a restaurant or something here in Saratoga. Well, they were selling some of their stuff. And I went up just to see what they had, in restaurant stuff. And I saw that. It was only $5, and I took it. And I've got more use out of that. I make bean soup with it, and everything. Make the chili. And 3 batches of them I threw out because I kept seeing this. You know how they say that if something's bad, you see like a foam on it on top, And I kept seeing this foam on top, and I was afraid that there was something wrong with it,
Yeah.
So I'd throw it out, and it took me 3 batches before I finally found out what was wrong. I was putting, you know how they say on a can of kidney beans that you're supposed to use the juice and everything? Well, I started draining it off, and it was all right, so there must be some kind of a preservative in there that was doing that.
Huh.
And I was scared to death something would be bad or something,
Right.
I wish this would start cooking a little bit. Of course, I usually cook, without any recipes or anything, so it's kind of hard for me to judge.
That's why we got to put it on the camera. So we.
I didn't open that right. I usually don't put the peppers in until really last because I like it a little bit crispy,
Uh huh.
A little bit of chili powder. I gave your mother a whole bunch of this because it's such a big thing. I would never use it,
Here goes the chili powder. Like about a tablespoon.
No, that's about 3/4 of a teaspoonful.
Oh, okay.
I usually taste it every once in a while to see if I've got enough.
Depending on your audience.
Yeah. Okay.
Now we're going to combine everything, is what I've been told. There go the beans and tomatoes into the sausage, onion, hamburger mixture.
Now we just put it on simmer, on low, and just let it cook and get flavored.
Mmm.